I'm Dan Dixie. I'm here with James Maroney. We're sitting on the old townhouse steps, and we're reversing roles. He's usually behind the camera and has the microphone, but we're going to talk to James a little bit and learn a little bit about him. So I guess let's start by, were you born, grew up on the North Shore or the Marblehead area?
I came from Boston City Hospital. I was an unwed mother, had twins, and she went to Catholic Charities, and I guess back in those days, in the late 50s, Boston City Hospital was the place that took care of like a lot of people that didn't have a lot of money and people that went to Catholic Charities and things. So technically I was born in Boston, so I don't know if I'd be a Bostonian or what.
Where were you living at the time?
I was like 8 or 9 months in a family from Winchester, so I guess that's the first official address I really had.
Yeah.
A couple from Winchester adopted me and my twin sister, Kate. So
how long have you been in Marblehead? I know you haven't been here a real long time.
No, about 5 years now. Yeah. So this fall will be 5 years since I actually physically moved here. But about 5.5 years ago, Joan Galaboy, who knew my work many years ago working in TV, asked me if I'd shoot a couple things for her. And the next thing you know, she's asked me if I'd want a job here. Before you knew it, I'm looking around the town. I'm like, this is a nice place to live. And a lot of people were saying, you'll never find a place in downtown Marblehead, let alone historic downtown Marblehead. And sure enough, I found a place in October 5 years ago. So I haven't, I just love living here.
Yeah, well, for a newcomer, I think you love Marblehead as much as anybody I know. What is it you like most about Marblehead, if there's one thing?
Well, I think the sea for sure is probably the main attraction, living on the sea. You can see the ocean 365 days a year, and as you know, Dan, I pretty much take advantage of it every day of the, whether it's freezing, cold out, snowstorm, beautiful day like today. We had, it was like 85, 90 degrees out in the summer. I love the ocean. It's just a nice backdrop, kind of. That's kind of.
Yeah, and I know one of your favorite spots is where we are now, the sitting on the steps of the old townhouse. You come down here most nights and just.
Yeah, I love the old townhouse steps. First of all, I love the building. Both sides. We're on the back side of it. I'm usually on the other side of it, but it's just such a beautiful building, and it's nice that I guess about 5 or 6 years ago they restored the whole building.
Yeah.
And it's just one of my favorite attractions, and it's the center of town, and it's got so much history involved with it, and also too you can kind of meet different people walking by. You might pick the brain for something they might know about. As you do the same thing. You look at photographs. I might say, hey, do you know anything about that building over there, or
Yeah. In fact, in the bench that's beside us here has always been a popular place for headers to talk and get the town gossip, and it's always been a pretty good spot to sit and relax and mingle with people as they go by.
So to follow up on your initial question as where I am from, so when people ask where are you from, so I basically grew up in Manchester by the Sea. So my teenage and high school years and young adult years were in Manchester by the Sea. So we were living in Winchester and Boxford when I was younger, but that's kind of when I got the lure of the sea. And we used to take the boat from Manchester to Maddie's. Now when I was in high school, 18 was the drinking age, so we get on somebody's boat. I'm not going to say the guy's name because he might be wanted for something right now, who knows. But we get on his boat and then we head to Maddie's and head back.
Yeah.
So that was our only real connection to Marblehead back. It was quicker to take a boat than it was to drive.
Yeah. So you've only been in Marblehead 5 years, but you're familiar with the area and you knew Marblehead before you.
Right, and as a kid, did sailing in Manchester at the yacht club there, and of course they had Marblehead Race Week, and I took part in that. So that was the early connection with Marblehead.
Yeah.
And I always look forward to doing the race week. We always came in last, but I enjoy getting out there on the water.
Yeah. And you've worked for MHTV for
about 5.5 years now.
But you do video on your own. I know photography and video. You
Right.
want to tell us a little about your background? I know you've gotten awards in the past.
Yeah, I'm an award-winning photographer from a home improvement show I worked on, probably in 2007. That was it's called the New England Emmy, and actually that particular award ceremony, they were honoring Mike Wallace for something. Probably for 60 Minutes, and Andy Rooney was there that same time, and so wasn't his daughter Emily Rooney, you might know from Channel 2 PBS. So that's my claim to fame for great awards and stuff like that. But I got started in 1984, and like I told you about, there's a fire that I'm doing a documentary about, the Elliott Chambers fire, and I just started working on Rantoul Street at the cable TV station in Beverly, and I worked for like a news show, and that's where I kind of got my training in television, and we did, like I said, a news show, and then I did a magazine show, and before you know it, I was working for Comcast in Boston, and I just always loved creating stuff. But I do stuff on my own. I'm one of those people that, you know, I do my regular 9-to-5 job per se, but I like to go home and play around, and I've created, you know, like historical documentaries. Did a thing in William Howard Taft probably about 10 or 12 years ago. He summered in Beverly at one time. Yeah. Stevens Hall, you might know him. Yeah. He hired me, not hired me, he was one of the guys that was part of the documentary. Yeah. So I like doing historical stuff on the North Shore, and you know, to make money doing like videos for websites and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you do, I mean, you don't just have a microphone and interview people and film it. You do all the post-production work and the editing and putting the things together, which behind the scenes, which people don't always realize how much goes into that part of it.
It's funny that you say that. So there was a guy that I worked with many years ago. He's still a Boston TV reporter, and I worked with him at a radio station. I worked at WNSH Radio too. I worked in radio at the same time. Back in those days, you know, we don't make a lot of money either now, but we made a lot less money. And I worked like 2 or 3 jobs at a time, and I worked at a radio station, I worked at a nightclub, and I worked at the TV station. And he said, you got to pick one thing: either be behind the camera, in front of the camera, shoot or edit, or produce. And I never listened to his advice. I basically produce, shoot, and edit anything that I do. And even the shows that I do for MHTV, I do some interview shows, and I actually lock the cameras down like you're doing right now and do the interviews. So yeah. I like doing everything.
Yeah, to have full control, and
right.
It's your baby. You know,
I don't have control issues. I just like to get the whole picture. I look at something and I have an idea of what I want to create. And people that hire me outside of MHTV for freelance stuff that I do know that I have a vision and a way of telling a story. And if someone were to ask me what I really do, I'd say I'm a storyteller. I consider myself as, like, when I work at Marblehead TV, I consider myself a storyteller. When I do my freelance work, I consider myself a storyteller. So having the ability to tell a story through video and film and photographs is pretty much what I would consider myself. But on a card, you have to put something, so I call myself a filmmaker.
Yeah. And photographer.
Right.
You've done a lot of
right.
photography, so.
Right.
Yeah. And you were, I know I have the veteran album on my Facebook page. I got a hold of a picture of you. You were in the service. You
right.
Just tell us a little bit.
Yeah. So the way that happened, it's interesting. It's not until recent years that I've actually talked about the military service that I did, and I was post-Vietnam, Cold War, which was, you know, I was like 2 or 3 years after the Vietnam War ended. Not maybe that, but it's close to that period when I signed up. So I'm in high school. I turned 18 when I was in high school. So not only was I legal to drink in high school, not that I drank when I went to high school, but, you know, I was 18 years old. In December of my senior year, just one day I said to myself, I think I want to join the Army. And I got on the train by myself and went in and came home and said, Mom, I joined the Army. And she said, sit down and eat your dinner. and then 2 weeks after school ended, when I graduated, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey in the Army, and I wanted to go overseas. So back in those days, it was called the Delayed Entry Program. So you could enter while you're still in high school, as long as you're 18 years old. And if you were younger, like 17, you could have a parent write for it. And I said, I want to go in the service, but I wanted to go overseas. I wanted to kind of see something other than the United States, and I chose Germany, and I ended up serving in West Germany, Augsburg, which is just outside of Munich. And I lived there for 3 years in the service. So it was a pretty good experience, and I never really thought much of it, that it was really a big deal, until when 9/11 came around. People were like recognizing firemen and policemen. And then, as you know, a lot of conflicts started happening overseas around that time too. And I just kind of lightly mentioned to people that I was in the service, and they started looking at me. And as you know, a lot of people were like, hey, there's people that were in the service. You know, they maybe didn't fight in a war or something, but, you know, I don't think we sacrificed, but I'm proud to be an American. And I think that's another reason I like living in Marblehead, because it's so patriotic, and I love the history and, you know, the connection with being in the service. I just feel honored to have served in the Army, and I have a lot of respect for people that in this town, like Harry Christensen, who was in the Vietnam War, yeah, and Buck Rader and Dave Rogers. They're three very humble guys, but very proud servicemen that did serve in wars and you know, conflicts and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. And doing the TV work, what's your favorite types of things to do? Historic documentaries, that style, or?
I like documentary. I like telling. I like kind of letting the story tell itself, whether it's his history. But my real favorite thing to do is just go out with the camera and just capture a natural setting. So if I interview somebody about something, it's nice to talk to them, and I like to get them in a natural setting. But I love going out and capturing the ocean, whether it's in the winter time or the springtime when life's coming back with the flowers and stuff. But just the beautiful summer scenes and stuff like that. The historic buildings in Marblehead. I love capturing, you know, photographs, which is video for me, really. I love having that tell the story. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I love capturing the natural beauty of things around town.
Yeah.
You know, I think a big reason I do what I do is I think it's important for people to tell their stories, whether they're a military veteran, historian telling you about some history that happened, or whether it's somebody with autism. One of the first things I did in the first couple of years I worked in television is there was a family, actually they were from Marblehead, and their daughter had autism. And it was kind of interesting to be able to tell the story about what they were dealing with their daughter having autism. Did another story at Windrush Farm where there's a thing called therapeutic equitation, and there's people that are handicapped and disabled physically, and horses were helping them, and it was just interesting to tell a story through things like that. And Holocaust survivors. Sonia Whites is somebody I interviewed back in, I think it was 1986, 87, around that time. She was a very well-known person here on the North Shore. She was in Poland, and she became a very powerful speaker and writer. And what I was really trying to say is I like hearing people's stories and documenting them, whether it's for MHTV or Bev TV when I worked for them back then, or my own freelance stuff, because, you know, years down the road, it'd be nice to hear somebody's story from, you know, 2019 in Marblehead, you know, what their life was like, what they did. And you know, like, you know, I'm a real fan. I have to get this out of Betty Hunt. You know, to hear her perspective on history. I mean, she obviously wasn't around when these things happened, but she's got a lot of research that she's done. She's talked to people. I know you've dealt with her a lot. She's looked at photographs and tried to understand the history, but you can bring it to a modern day understanding that Marblehead in some ways is still the way it was, you know, 100, 200, 300 years ago. The way it looks, you know, some of the buildings, yeah, the seascape, but the stories, you know, might be a little bit different, but it's still that kind of that thread where you're hearing people's stories, and I think people need to know about them. I mean, you should know, you've written some books and stuff, and you put together some pictorial books where, you know, people will look down the road, you know, 5, 10, 20, hopefully 100, 200 years from now, and you've documented the story. You know, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I think I'll just close by saying what I don't know why I'm thinking of this. It's kind of a strange thing to think. You know, we live in an area of the country, especially Boston, where we're spoiled. We have, you know, I'm a Boston Red Sox #1, and, you know, Patriots, Bruins, and Celtics are kind of, you know, a little bit behind the scenes there. I mean, I like both of them, but all three of them. But, you know, we have a common thread around here. We all love sports and the Red Sox and stuff. But, you know, you and me and a lot of other people in this town of Marblehead, our common thread and connection is history. I mean, I can talk about history all day long, you know.
Yeah, it's a great subject. All right, well, thank you for your time, and it was nice talking to you.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Thanks.